Hey, college sports fans, welcome to season 4. How many times do you pass the ball? 4. This is the Reign Supreme All A podcast, season 4, as the college football preseason moves into high gear. We are going to start taking a look at the Tigers at every position group, and we are going to start each of these episodes, however, by taking a look at something we have been working on for way too long, Daniel, isn't it?
Yeah, hey, it's good to be back, right? It's been a
Yeah.
while. I'm Daniel Shirley. He's Bill Zimmerman. But yeah, we've been discussing what we were going to do all summer, and your job got in the way. My job changed, got in the way a little bit. We do
Family.
have we family stuff has come up. We do have paychecks that have to that we lean into, right? And we are beholden to those. So, but it's good to be back. I'm excited about this series that we're going to do. It's some past Clemson stuff and some current Clemson stuff to get us ready for the upcoming season.
Yep, I'm excited about this. We have been working on it. We're not the only ones to have done this, but we did start a while back. We gathered a lot of stats. We really took a close look at things, and we decided not to back off. We're going to stick with it by looking at the all-time best at each position for the Clemson Tigers. And, you've been watching Clemson slightly longer than I have. It was a little tougher growing up down here in Florida to find a lot of Tigers games to watch. You were in the stadium for a lot of them. You had, what was it, Raycom, Jefferson Pilot, all those things. So you
Yeah.
got a lot of good memories with your dad going in the stadium, watching from just a few miles away on the days that you weren't in Death Valley, the real Death Valley, by the way. A lot of talk about that. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Daniel, who comes to mind? We're going to start this episode with defensive tackles, as you saw in the thumbnail. Who comes to mind out of let me set the table real quick. These are not going to be ranked like 10 through 1 or anything like
No.
that. But we do kind of have like a second tier and a top tier. And usually there's going to be 4 guys in that top tier at each position, but you can't just limit it to 4, right? There are so many guys who have been, I tried to use first team All-Americans as far as, hey, where's the starting point for this, right? And then obviously anyone is in the Ring of Honor in Death Valley is in this thing. So who are some of those guys without giving away those top 4 who you really think about a lot? You had some names on here that I had not thought of when I said, "Hey, where should I start looking?" Be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. It's free. It's the best place to catch all our episodes, and it's the best place for you to comment with your reactions.
Well, even like the name's not at the top of the list, but you look at William Devane, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think we're even going to talk about William Devane very much because of the other names that are going to come up. But he's a guy that played on that first championship team, played alongside William Perry. So you look at Jim Stuckey, right? I mean, you look at some of these other guys who played when I first started going to games in the mid 70s, late 70s with my dad. And in the early 80s, and then you get into, William Perry and those guys. And then the guys that we now see, the current group, not on the team right now, but this most recent group that has come through. So, look, Bill, I mean, Archie Reese, right? Jim Stuckey. I mean, those guys are guys that I grew up on going to Clemson games with my dad. And then it kind of filtered into some of these other names. So, Rob Bodine was there when we were in school.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten about him until you mentioned him. So I think that's where you kind of start. Grady Jarrett is a great one. Remember him? He was kind of a throw-in recruit at the end of that class, and people are like, why is Clemson offering Grady Jarrett? What I mean, what is he? He's a 2-star, and then look what he became and what he's become in the NFL. So, and that's another thing too. We're doing this based on what they did at Clemson. This is not what they've done in the NFL or what they will do in the NFL.
Right.
This is just based on what they will do or have done at Clemson. And it's a heck of a group, man. It really is.
It's hard to believe that Grady Jarrett, as accomplished as he is, doesn't quite crack that top 4, right? I mean,
Right.
you look at all that he meant, and by the way, one thing I think is timely talking about Grady Jarrett is, Clemson has been passed over. They've been finalists with a couple of recruits right now. Commit season is going full steam, and I see a lot of people on the message boards like really upset. Oh, we didn't get this guy there. We're not going to get anybody at that position now, or I guess we're done at that position, or we'll just have to hit the portal and overpay somebody or whatever. Like people are giving up. You know, Grady Jarrett, just a perfect example. Like you said, a two-star guy coming in. I guess he was viewed as a fallback recruit publicly by some people. You don't know what the coaches in-house really thought about that, and get behind the scenes and be a fly on the wall for those conversations. But look at all he did. All right, from 2011 to 2014, 207 tackles. 29 and a half tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 37 QB pressures, a pass breakup, right? A guy in the middle with a pass breakup. He gets that
Yep.
paw up there and knocks the ball out of the air. A couple caused fumbles, easy for me. I fumbled the delivery on that. 4 recovered fumbles and 1,642 career snaps. Two-star guy. Kind of fits your stars doesn't matter mantra a little bit there, doesn't it? So I want to get into some of these others real quick. Bryan Bresee, I think everybody remembers him real quick. He's moved on to the New Orleans Saints. Uh, First round draft pick, 15 tackles for loss, 9 sacks. An injury riddled and family issue riddled career in his 3 years at Clemson. You love to see him getting those highlights in New Orleans and really having the chance to ramp up. Rob Bodine, one of the guys I mentioned, first team All American, right? That's what, for me, put him on the list. Exactly. An undersized guy, but really, really effective from 89 to 91. And I guess back then it was a little easier to be undersized, but still be effective. 48 tackles for loss over the course of his career, and maybe he's benefiting from some other guys getting double teamed next to him, but he led the nation with 27 tackles for loss as a senior in 91. And that's no fluke, right? Like you've got to have the ability to pull that off no matter how many other guys might be getting double teamed around you. Jim Stuckey, another guy you mentioned, 76 to 79. Back, admittedly, I was not watching a ton of Clemson football in the mid and late 70s. First round draft pick, 18 sacks, 314 tackles, very accomplished with his time here. I don't think I found anything on Archie Reese. If you're out there, Archie, forgive me. I didn't find your numbers. It is tough to find numbers on these defensive guys going way back, by the way. That's one of the things that took a ton of time. And then William Perry, even with him, tough to find numbers. The fridge. I mean, really, one of the fun things about that 81 team that really put Clemson on the map. I mean, people were discovering Danny Ford, people were discovering what Clemson toughness was all about. And of course, the undefeated season, I think, was unexpected by most of the country. And then here's this guy who's bigger than a fridge, and that's the poster floating around. And I think just about every TV broadcast that I've seen, either during that season or on old YouTube clips that I've watched since then, they've all got that obligatory, William Perry next to a refrigerator. First round draft pick, very nimble. He was a freshman on that championship team and stood out. A very good team, and that he rose into prominence with 25 sacks and 60 tackles for loss. Another one who you say, how is he not in the Final Four?
Yeah.
You
Yeah, it's
know?
hard it's hard, Bill, even to think what he meant to the program. It's hard to believe that he wouldn't be in the top four,
Yeah.
right? But that just shows you what these other guys have meant. I mean, William Perry might have been the face of that team, right? I mean, or if he wasn't, it was him, it was Jeff Davis, it was Homer, it was Cliff Austin, Perry Tuttle. Those were kind of the guys who were the go-to guys as far as, oh, what's this team all about? And William Perry was certainly in that group, even though he was only a true freshman. So, but Bill, I mean, one we don't have here on the list. What about Carlos Watkins? Right? We
Oh
know
yeah.
what Carlos Watkins meant to that first championship team, right? And that group that he had the young group coming up behind him, and we're going to talk about a couple of those guys. He was the elder statesman on that team, or one of the elder statesmen. So, it certainly has been a deep position for Clemson through the years. And I will definitely say when Clemson has been at its best, that they've been really, really good on the defensive line.
For sure, and what an extended run. I mean, that was definitely a hallmark of that 81 championship team. And then the teams when you and I were on campus, the whole front seven really was just
Yep.
absolutely loaded. And I think the linebackers got a lot of run then with Kirkland and McDaniel, Mr. Inside and Mr. Outside. And, so many of the other guys who made the NFL out of that group, Wayne Simmons, just an
John Johnson.
otherworldly
Yep.
talent. Yeah, John Johnson. Went on to your Niners, if I remember right. You know, Mike Barber was on a roster for a while. So let's get into who this Final Four is. And by the way, we'll get into some names later who we may look back a few years from now and think they belong on that list for sure. But let's connect with us on social media. That's at Clemson Kickoff. Whether you're on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, or Facebook, you'll find us there. Let's take a look here. So we've got maybe my favorite, just an electric guy to watch. Unbelievable. Chester McGlockton, 1988 to 1991. The late Chester McGlockton, rest in peace. Unfortunately, we're going to say that about a few of these guys on these lists coming up. Definitely gone before his time. First round draft pick, went to the Raiders and just raised mayhem in the NFL. And I remember the old Nike commercial with him going, boo. It's like this
Yeah.
montage of clips and everything, and they just cut to him with a dark backdrop. Boop. It was tremendous. 20 and a half sacks. And the one I remember most is in that Gator Bowl against
Oh,
West Virginia. And he sacks Major Harris, notices that he popped the ball loose, just throws Harris to the side and dives on the ball in the end zone
for a
for a
touchdown.
sack
Yep.
and a touchdown. Just an unbelievable play. And that to me was the epitome of who he was, right? You just never knew when he was going to explode in the other team's face and have a giant play. An absolute wrecking ball of a player, which I will say about one of the news guys coming up in a little bit. But what do you remember most about Chester?
I just remember him being physical and scary and
Yeah.
tough and just beating people up on the defense, up front in the trenches. And it is that play, right, against West Virginia. That's the play where that if you go, hey, what's one play about each of these guys? Well, that's the play about Chester McGlockton and that sack and fumble recovery for a touchdown and the way they beat up Major Harris in that game. I mean, to the point that his mother said on the sideline, pretty much he needs to go to the NFL. Like he doesn't
Yeah.
need to do this anymore, right? But Chester was the kind of the building block of that defense for a couple of years. Yeah, and look, my dad always said this, and I agree with him. That team after our freshman year with Chester and that team that beat Major Harris and West Virginia, and there were people talking about them being number one in the country the next year.
Yep.
And then we all know what happened with the coaching staff. And I do think that if that coaching change doesn't happen, that team would have had a chance to win a national title.
Absolutely.
And, maybe we elevate these guys on that, in that era to the era that we're in now and the era that we grew up on, right? But I think I still say that 89 team is one of the two or three best teams at Clemson that did, especially that didn't win a title, but it's right behind those three teams that did win a national title.
Yep. Another team that had trouble with its run gap fits in that fateful day up at Duke. And gosh, the
Yeah.
campus was just after that loss at Duke with, I think it was Randy Cuthbert, who just kind of gashed the defense all day long in the rain. And a big Steve Spurrier win over Clemson, if I remember right. I think he
Yeah.
was there back then. And yeah, everything just kind of deflated after that. Here's another one of my favorites, also in this group of Final Four, Christian Wilkins. And I mean, he's kind of right in there with some of those other names we talked about, William Perry and Grady Jarrett. But maybe it's a little easier because the stats were more reliable by the time he played. 250 tackles, 41 of them tackles for loss, and with 16 sacks. 56 quarterback pressures. And to me, it goes beyond those stats, right? He's the career snaps by a defensive lineman leader at 2,441. He's the career pass breakups by a defensive lineman leader with 16. But he was so athletic that sophomore year. He moved
Right.
outside. He came back to tackle for the junior year. I was sitting in I want to say Joe Robbie. I don't know what the stadium in Miami was called, but I was in that corner of the end zone where he's running that route like right at that corner of the stadium and catches that pass on the fake punt from Andy Teasdall and hauls it in. It was just such a view. And then you remember the old social media videos of him like catching passes on a bicycle or something like that. And there was a spring game where he played safety and like blew up a play from the edge, way outside on the edge. Just the athleticism was off the charts with Christian Wilkins.
Well, and there are a couple other things too, right? He won two national titles. He won the academic Heisman. He was a leader on that team. Remember when all the stuff happened with the quarterback situation and Kelly Bryant and Trevor Lawrence said Christian Wilkins was the one that took him to lunch or breakfast that day
Yep.
and sat down and talked to him. And you saw the leadership of him. Bill, I think he's one of my 5 favorite players who's ever played at Clemson.
Same.
I do. You could talk about quarterbacks and running backs and receivers and all the glamour positions. Nobody has meant more to winning than Christian Wilkins. And he came back for that 4th year, right? When they lost to Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, and they came that, and it wasn't just him, it was Cleveland Farrell, it was Austin Bryant.
Yeah.
That group came back to try to win another national title, and they did. They don't win another national title without those 3 guys
Right.
coming back. Now, again, that's hypothetical, who knows, but that's the way I feel about it. And so that elevates him in my mind to, he's right up there. And you and I've talked about doing an episode of that, of our favorite Clemson players ever. He's in that group for me. There's no doubt about that.
Yep, absolutely. You mentioned someone else who, well, it was his 3rd year, so he wasn't going pro early, but part of that group, Dexter Lawrence, 2016 to 18, 162 tackles, 20 of those for loss with 11 sacks, 43 QB pressures. You look at the rate, 3 years for Sexy Dexy, as he's called, versus Wilkins. The pace is pretty darn close, and just the frame that he brought to the table. He was a first team All-American. He was a first round draft pick. 160, I mentioned, yeah, got all the numbers covered. And to me, my memory of him was I went to Auburn that freshman year. We had some wonderful hospitality with friends of my wife's, and who she had met through the bass fishing tour, and we had end zone seats. And I don't think Dexter started that game, but I first noticed him, I think maybe the second possession that Auburn had the ball. And like 3 plays in a row, he either made the tackle or forced a hurry and caused mayhem, just bursting through the line. Nobody knew how to block him on those 3 initial plays of him coming in as a true freshman in the season opener. It was just fabulous. And even seeing that from the wrong end of the field, it was amazing. It was something to watch.
Maybe the most talented player on this list.
Yeah.
Again, you talk about Wilkins, you could talk about Chester, you talk about William Perry. I don't know that they've ever had a big man like Dexter Lawrence. I just don't. What he meant to the middle of that defense, playing next to Christian Wilkins, right? And when Christian played on the outside, a little bit different, but he's, in my mind, probably the most talented defensive tackle Clemson's ever had.
Well, could be. And, something that you and I have talked about a time or two in other episodes in seasons 1 through 3. Of course, this is season 4, as you may have heard, is Lawrence and Wilkins seem to have this ability to like hold a block that they knew they could shed as soon as the play came their way. Like they own their space, they contain that space, and you didn't really, it wasn't always with them about like that first step and like blowing into the backfield like a guy like Perry or McLaughlin. You've got so many clips like that. But as soon as they knew they had that ball within range and that play within range, or a play that they knew they could make, like all of a sudden the offensive lineman was not a factor in the play at all. And there were those 2 guys making plays left and right. Who do you double team? I mean, you can't double team them both. And you got Furl and Bryant on the edges. You got some dang good linebackers behind them. So just what an era it was to watch those 2 guys go together. And, hey, check out our website, clemsonkickoff.com. It's got kickoff times. It's got archives of episodes and blogs, some offers. It's a simple resource for you. And then we will have our first Ring of Honor member who actually will be inducted this season, and it's Michael Dean Perry. As much as I loved watching William Perry, I always felt like Michael Dean was actually the better player of the game. Like William Perry was out there, and he kind of, like you said about Lawrence, like just such a talent, right? But Michael Dean just seemed to have a knack for being in the right place at the right time every time. I'm sure if they did PFF grades back then, he would have been very, very high. And it shows with the career tackles for loss leader at 61. It's not like he didn't make big plays. 28 sacks, first team All-American again. And then it's so cool to see him going into the Ring of Honor. I have always liked that number 91 jersey. In fact, my wife was wearing it going into the national title game in Alabama, and Dexter McLean was in line in front of us waiting to get in, saw that and said, "That's a great Clemson number right there."
He's a guy I grew up on,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and you too as well. I mean, he was there right before we went to school there, a couple of years before we went to school there. He's a little bit younger than William, so there was that 1 year of overlap, I think, right? So, but he was so talented and so strong up front, and you just knew what you were going to get from him every single game. And he didn't play on the greatest Clemson teams ever, but you never doubted what you were going to get from Michael Dean. And I know, again, I know a lot of people are going to talk about William Perry. He's a great player, right? And a great face of the program. But Michael Dean, I look, I think he's right there. I don't think you want to debate the list, that's fine, but I don't think anybody's going to argue against Michael Dean Perry and what he meant to that program.
No, just a tremendous, tremendous football player. And so I hope, I shouldn't have stopped sharing already, but you notice there was kind of a revisit. You got the photo that we started with and ended with the two Perry brothers with the sign in between them. And then they sort of revisited that at Clemson with Lawrence and Wilkins there. So I hope everybody picked up on that. And those were pretty cool when I thought to use those. And so they are pulled from the Clemson Football Media Guide or ClemsonTigers.com, wherever each of those came up. And so part of the way to illustrate like what these guys mean to the program, I think. Uh, we talk in sports about like sometimes the now always seems to mean more, but I think that list really spans like the most important years of Clemson football in a lot of ways, at least starting with what would that be, the Charlie Pell era there with Archie Reese and Jim Stuckey, or maybe would that go back to guy before Pell or
No, Pell, yeah,
yeah.
Pell and Danny Ford, right? I mean, I think maybe the start of Reese's career might have been before Pell, but yeah,
Yeah.
Pell and Danny Ford.
So there's a lot going on there, through the years, and not too many of those guys. It was cool to see the Perry brothers as teammates, obviously, growing up, and then to see some terrific ball players. I mean, you saw Jeff Davis's kids be teammates later on as well. So
Yeah,
always fun to
yeah.
see the brothers pair up. So let's get into this year, and I don't know that we'll really see anyone vault onto that list. But if anyone does, it would have to be Peter Woods, and I think he is viewed widely as the leader of the 2025 Clemson Tigers defensive tackles room.
Yeah, look, I think that it might be hard for Peter to get on that list just because he's been banged up a little bit. He's moved around some. He played on some on the outside last year, but man, he has a big year this year, and they do some special things. Maybe he is on that list, right? We didn't include Brenson Buckner on that list. I mean, there's lots of good players who aren't on that list. It's not a it's not a hey, here's our top 10. These are just names that jumped out at us, and so no, I think Peter Woods has a really good chance to have a special year. Look, I think I'm so glad Capehart is back, right?
Yeah.
Demonte Capehart. I thought that was a huge piece of the puzzle for Clemson to get him back. And then you look at some young guys behind those two. Obviously, that there's a lot of depth there, and it's a lot of young depth, or maybe depth that hasn't played as much as you would have thought, like a Vic Burley or Stephon Green, or then you get into the redshirt freshman. I tell you, who I can't wait to watch is Amari Adams.
Yeah.
Right, that's a name that I think, as a true freshman, I think you could see him have some impact on this team.
Hearing a lot about him. I do want to back up to Capehart, and Woods lost some time last year to injury and maybe wasn't
Yeah,
in the best shape because of that. Capehart has really been dogged by injuries. I mean, it's a lot like, you just hear that these days, right? The game is so tough. Everybody's so strong, and you play a ton of plays, and guys are even getting hurt in practice. And I think that's where it started with Capehart. But that's the guy who reminds me in not necessarily, every physical trait, but his impact and the ways that he makes impact with big plays reminds me of Chester McLaughlin, just able to burst his way into the backfield and absolutely just end a play before it even begins. And so the more we can see a Capehart this coming season, the better off I think it's going to be. And then Burley is another guy in the similar boat. He's been dealing with injuries. I think it all started with practice when he was an early enrollee. Obviously, I believe, a distant cousin of Nick Eason, the
Yeah,
defensive tackles coach. Burley's a guy from your area, and you've talked
right.
before about just all the potential that he's got to make a big impact in that room.
Well, you just want him to be healthy,
Yeah,
right? It almost feels like he's been cheated of his chances because he's been hurt so much. So, but Bill, we kind of said the same thing about Capehart before last year.
right.
And then Capehart had a really good year last year and stayed on the field. So that's what I thought this getting will help on the outside, and we'll talk about him. I know coming up
Right.
in our next episode or later episode, and having the having a little more solid play on the defensive ends allows Peter Woods to be a defensive tackle.
Yeah.
He's played a lot of different spots. He's been moved around a lot, and he's been hurt. Let's just see him be a defensive tackle this year and see what he could be. But I love Capehart. I mean, I'm a big fan of Capehart. I
Yeah.
really am a big fan of him. I can't wait to see what Woods is going to be this year. And then those young guys, again, like I want to see Adams for sure. But I think this is the year where you see Green and Burley really become pieces of the puzzle. Like maybe we thought they would be earlier, but again, some injuries have slowed them down some.
Yeah. And they, when you mentioned a few minutes ago about Lawrence and Wilkins, if Wilkins doesn't come back, maybe that team doesn't win that title. Lawrence, Furl, Bryant, any or all of those guys, but they did have Albert Huggins and Niles Pinckney,
Right.
two pretty stout guys right behind them, and Huggins proved himself in the playoffs in 2018, and Pinckney, of course, had the big stop on the fake field goal, and I've seen him, I had seen him make other good plays through the years. He ended up transferring out the next season. Huggins went pro, but this is a chance for these guys to earn that kind of respect that people gave to Huggins and to Pinckney, right? So whoever's going to emerge, whether it's going to be Adams as a true freshman, whether it's going to be Green, who also was very lauded in that class, signed the same year as Peter Woods, and there are even a few whispers about, well, Woods. Let's see what Woods' physique is and how that translates to college. But Green seems to be the higher floor, the more can't miss guy. And then, again, backing up to Burley, just he's capable of being just a wrecking ball kind of a player as well. We just need to see it, and we need him to be healthy enough to get on the field. And as Bill Parcells used to say, you can't make the club in the tub, and
Right.
Dabo Sweeney prefers the best ability is availability, right? So we'll see how it emerges. But I love that this room is five deep, and they can rotate a lot of guys. They can move guys through, keep guys fresh. If someone wants two or three plays to catch his breath and stay fresh, there's the opportunity for Nick Eason and Tom Allen to really manage that situation. Work with Chris Rumpf and say, hey, I want to get so and so in there. We know who he works well alongside. There may not be that same luxury at defensive end coming this year, so there may be some juggling there, but at least inside in the middle, uh, quite a capable room.
Doesn't it
So
feel like this is the first time they've had that kind of depth in a couple of years? I mean, I really feel like that. Now, again, they've got to stay healthy, but it feels like, getting Adams and having Green and having Burley and those kinds of guys, haven't mentioned having Brown Schuler, right? Or Champ Thompson.
yep.
Those are two guys who redshirted last year. So it just feels like they've got more depth this year, and hopefully that'll pan out.
Yeah, and I've been probably guilty of looking at things through orange colored lenses a time or two with the defensive tackles room in recent years, but I was a big fan of the defensive line groups the last several years, even since 2018. Guys like Bresee and Miles Murphy and
Right.
Capehart, when he first got to campus, I was looking forward to him. Trey Williams, Tyler Davis, some other big bodies in there who were capable of getting in the backfield. but some of it is just about, the health. But I think this year what makes a difference is we have seen Green get some snaps under his belt. We've seen Burley out there in a spring game finally and doing his thing and showing what he can do. Mari Adams out there. So it does feel like this is a little more concrete that you're going to be able to rotate some guys and not just late in a blowout. They don't necessarily have to wait for that. Not necessarily against a smaller opponent, but I think guys can get two, three quality snaps at a time against just about anybody on the schedule.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, I mean, having Pinckney and Huggins was big for that group,
Hmm.
right? And having William Devane was big for Fridge Perry, right? And the depth that they had back then, you that allows you to play harder in shorter stints, and
Yeah,
that always makes you a better player, no
yeah.
doubt about that,
Even Scott Pagano, like in that Carlos Watkins
right?
or the early Christian Wilkins era, like Pagano was kind of an undersized guy, ended up transferring out to Oregon, but rotated his way through and was really effective in there. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to see from that group of Adams and Burley and Green this year, and see them really rise to the occasion, because this is probably it for Woods, and sure seems definitely it for Capehart, unless
Yep.
there's some kind of new legal precedent that allows him to do something else. Well, look, I hope everybody is enjoying this kind of that look back and look at this coming season. We are going to keep doing this. We're going to roll through all. Are we doing 10? I don't think we're going to do special teams. So I think we're looking at 10 position units. Maybe we'll get special teams. Who knows? And then we'll start looking at some of the breaking news as summer and fall camps commence. Still some recruiting news out there that we haven't been able to get to, so we'll do another catch up on that as well. But we are excited about season 4. Hope you're going to enjoy this format as this off season wraps up and as the preseason cranks up. So uh, I think it's going to be a big year for these Tigers, and we'll see if they can reach all their goals. But regardless, there are a lot of reasons for this preseason to have a lot more optimism than the last, even though, again, I've been a little bit guilty of maybe thinking too much of the last few teams. Huh?
Well, a lot of depth now and a lot of experience. Where before there was, even the last couple of years, look, Peter Wood's a young guy. Now he's a junior, right? I mean, so just specifically on this group. So, no, I think a lot of people are picking Clemson to go to the playoff. I think if you even took off your orange glasses, I know how you are. If you take those off, you would say they should be favored to win the ACC. Now they got to go do it. But there's a lot of high hopes with good reason about this team going into this season. And I think that is definitely true about the defensive tackles.
Awesome. Well, we'll keep at it, and if any news starts to break, we will maybe interrupt this series to bring that in as well. So until our next episode, which I do think will be defensive ends, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.